Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, people of all ages, welcome back to the Sticky Floors podcast. I am one of your hosts, CJ. I am joined by Mr. Will. Tonight, we are talking about Boyz in the Hood. They got Boyz with a Z on it. We are not going to put a Z on the end of floors for Sticky Floors because it's 2024, not 1991. So, we don't have to turn all of our S's into Z's to prove that we're down. And just, for the listening audience who can't see me wearing a red shirt today means nothing. It was just a part of circumstantial situation that made that happen.
Yeah.
That's not how we're going tonight. But with that said, we're gonna get it started. I'm gonna kick it over to my main man, Mr. Will, so we can get started on this journey of talking about movies. For everyone who has been following us for the last month, the movies that we've been covering have been dealing with fathers and fatherhood and what happens when fathers are in the present and what happens when fathers are not present. So first two movies that we covered, 99 Homes and He Got Game, was more like what happens when fathers are not around or not around all the time. The last two are Bronx Tale and now Boyz in the Hood definitely deal with when fathers are present and how their families and how their sons in particular benefit.
Yeah, definitely. And before we get into this here recount of Boys in the Hood, how was your time in between Father's Day, all that good stuff, man? What'd you do?
Oh, that's right, right. Because actual
Yeah,
Father's Day happened, right?
yeah,
Yeah. No, Father's Day was really good. It's like I always think about the Chris Rock joke about getting the big piece of chicken.
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
kind of like what the father
yeah.
thing is, Father's Day is thing. But I think the it's great to get the positive feedback and affirmation
Mm,
from the people I love and the people that love me about Father's Day. But there's two that usually really stand out, and one is like when my mom tells me that she thinks I'm a good father
okay.
because she's always said that my father was a good father too, and he is a good father. But I also know like she's got a real comparison
Yeah,
to compare it to, right? And then, of course, my daughter says it. Like I know, like it's coming from a place of, sincere love and appreciation. So I'm not a person that really likes a lot of like fanfare and attention.
okay.
So it's kind of a weird day for me, but I do always appreciate hearing it from the two of them.
It's,
So I would say that. What about with you, man?
um, well, I think that's why we get along so well because I'm pretty similar. I deflect a lot of attention. I'm just not comfortable with it. But I think, and honestly, I'm not saying this just because we're on the show. I think I'm an average father at best. But it's real talk, man. Like I go through the game tape just like I do with these shows, and I
Hmm.
always have like the 2020 hindsight, and I'm
Yeah,
rewinding things and thinking if I did this or if I didn't say that or if I,
yeah,
so but like you, when I have three daughters, so when they do, shout me out or they write something that I said maybe like months, years ago, I'm like,
yes,
okay, they were listening,
yeah,
and they liked what I said.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's weird. And when I hear older people always comment about how they see me out and about with my kids and that's
Hmm.
a very positive thing, and all the compliments and stuff that I've gotten throughout the years, I'm like, I guess it wasn't for show. I guess they were
Yeah,
sincere about it. So
yeah.
yeah,
I think that when you're doing parenting right, and I'm not saying this because you're my friend and
yeah,
we're talking about it. I think that when you're doing parenting right, you're always second guessing yourself.
yeah, yeah.
I think like if somebody say like, "Yo, I'm a great father," like somebody says that, you might want to be a little skeptical of that, because I think it's like it's so much trial and error,
Yeah.
And I remember my dad saying, if there was a book that you could read that would tell you how to do all the things correctly as a parent, everybody would read the book,
Mm,
but it doesn't exist
yeah.
because there is no right way all the time. There's just whatever you think is best at that time, and then sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. but you always, I think at the end, what you end up doing is trusting that your children will see your intentions over your execution. Meaning,
Mm.
like, yeah, dad messed that up, but I understand what he was trying to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, dad was great, or dad messed everything up. Like maybe they just realize that. And I also, and I'll just say this last part. I think, as adults, if you have the ability to critique your parents' parenting,
Mm.
then they did a good job,
Oh, okay.
because they put you in a position where you have the wherewithal to now be critical of the decisions that they made.
I can take that.
So many people don't even have that.
Mm.
So many people can never go back and wonder or say, I remember when dad said this, or I remember when mom did that, or I remember when this. They don't even have those experiences
Right.
because that person wasn't even there,
Mm.
sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, to even give them that memory,
Yeah.
or even give them that moment of reflection. So, it's the entire relationship between parents and children is it's a communal one, and it's an interconnected one.
That's a dope segue. Um, I'm going to put the cherry on top by saying this. In the movie The Accountant, J.K. Simmons' character, he goes into the spot where the mob is getting slaughtered by Ben Affleck's character. And Ben Affleck gets the drop on him. And he says, "Were you a good dad?" And J.K. Simmons says to him, well, prior to that, obviously, he says, I'm a father. I'm a father, and basically pleading for his life. He says, "Were you a good dad?" And he says, "I've done a lot of bad things, but that I didn't mess up." And I'm
Hmm.
always reminded of that um, in that space, especially this month when we've been talking about movies and fathers and their roles and how significant of a guiding force and a guiding light they play. So, with that
Yeah,
being said,
absolutely.
um, Boys in the Hood is a profound coming of age film set against the gritty, complex backdrop of urban blight and poverty in inner city America. The stark reality showcases the challenges of puberty, manhood, and making stark choices that could determine life or death. The film's poignant portrayal of respect and crime exposes the vulnerability of young men navigating a world where 1 in every 21 will die from gun violence, usually
Hmm.
at the hands of their peers. The central characters, including one striving for athletic success while the other succumbs to drugs and alcohol, exemplifies the divergent paths that youths in such environments can take. Despite their effort to avoid the gangs that pervade their neighborhood, the omnipresent threat of violence looms. The narrative delves deeply into themes of respect and desperate need to prove oneself, often culminating in fatal consequences. The stark depiction serves as a sobering reminder of the complexities and harsh realities faced by those growing up in the impoverished urban areas. In the end, Boys in the Hood is not just a film, but a mirror reflecting the trials of retaining one's humanity amidst pervasive societal decay.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. And man, this this is our second John Singleton movie.
Yeah.
So, we did in episode 6, we did Baby Boy. And John Singleton, his career, you can see the love that he has for his community, because he tells these stories in that community, like Baby Boy, Boys in the Hood, Poetic Justice. They're told in this community, all maybe even all in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like when you think about like just kind of how it all overlaps. And then like We Love Snowfall, right? And that's
Oh
like
man.
that's the ode to California in the 90s and late 80s, early 90s. There's so much in here, and there's so much to get into. And when you mention that part about the 1 in 21 being
Yeah.
victims of gun violence, like that's heavy, right? And it's such a point in the movie to emphasize that. It just I knew it, but it's like when you hear the numbers, it just strikes me.
Yeah.
So I know we're gonna jump into that when we jump into the culture part. So let's get into the culture part, man.
Yeah, man. I think I hate to beat a dead horse this and be so grim from the rip, but the fact that you're dealing with this trauma that these individuals share and carry, not just from their childhoods, but all the way into manhood, and even when they venture elsewhere in whatever they're going to do for the remainder of their lives. I think it's dope that you have someone like Furious Styles, and I'm probably gonna beat this over and over because I just love that
Hmm.
name. I love Laurence Fishburne as an actor. Reminds me of my dad, like resemblance, uh, traits, like just everything. But the fact that he's a mortgage broker, he's not a garbage man. He's a
Hmm.
professional. He's not a blue collar worker, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that in the least bit.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
got
this
you.
is a divergent from the typical James Evans, and he's not a doctor like the Cosby Show and things of that ilk.
Heathcliff
Yeah,
Huxtable, right? Yeah.
like he is just a guy who is doing just enough to get by. He owns his own business and he's a pillar in the community. Um, the fact that he is a very calming influence, you don't see him, ranting and raving. He does uh, very strategic things that gets his point across, but he's a calming influence. Whereas they're living in the midst of chaos. They have,
Hmm.
I mean, the opening scene when Trey comes down is, "Hey, do you want to see a dead body?" Like
Yep.
it's like the anti or the reverse of Stand By Me. Like, yeah, they're going to go
Yeah.
see a dead body, but it's not under the same circumstances whatsoever. It kind of reminds me of this meme where they talk about like the slang of black people is the opposite of white people, where it's just like, is it hot? Nah, it's cold.
Yeah.
Things of
Yeah.
that nature. But nonetheless,
Yeah.
I definitely think that the trauma that is throughout this movie is very poignant, and it's not for the sake of just having violence or showing a dead body, but it's driving home the point that these individuals have found some type of normalcy amidst things that otherwise
Mm,
would bring someone to their breaking point and maybe even past it.
yeah. That the normalcy part, that's the real danger of being in a continuously traumatic environment,
Yeah,
is that you adjust to it and it starts to not seem as crazy as it actually is.
yeah,
And there's two things that I was thinking about when you said that. One is, remember like how many like hip hop songs in like the 80s and 90s would have like little interludes, and the interlude would be like two guys just randomly fighting
yeah,
or arguing, and all of a sudden you hear gunshots and then the song would start. Like just the idea of like that normalizing violence at that level,
hmm,
you hear it and it almost becomes entertainment,
yes,
which means you're like kind of disassociated from it. And when you're in an environment like that, no matter who you are, if you're in it for so long, you don't even realize how it's impacted you. I remember years ago, I went to Ghana, right? So I used to live in a part of Washington D.C. and I went to Ghana for a couple of weeks. And I came back, and the neighborhood I was in, there was gunfire every night, right? Every night there was gunfire. When I left, I came back. I was gone for 2 weeks. I was in Ghana. There was no gunfire, nothing. You didn't hear anything at all, right? All you heard was birds, right? When I got back, the first time that I heard gunshots, it
it
like
startles
surprised
you.
me and jarred me. Right. And then I remembered that I'd always been hearing it, but after a while, I'd become desensitized to it
Hmm.
because it was just happening all the time. And it was like my natural response to chaos was distorted and disrupted because it was happening so frequently. And the thing that this movie highlights, and you just brought it up again, is like the idea of everyone is living in this environment where violence is happening at the drop of a moment for no reason whatsoever. And it's extremely violent, it's extremely quick, and it's gun violence related. And they become desensitized to it because, like, they can go out to a party, shooting happens, and then they can go home, go get some burgers, and keep it moving. You know what I mean? Like, and like the more desensitized you become, the better you function and operate, or at least you seem like you're functioning and operating in that place.
Yeah, and the state of affairs at that time, it was almost like a prelude to what would happen with the riots, the Rodney King riots at that time, or well, the riots
Mm-hmm.
that involved Rodney King, and then shortly thereafter you have the OJ incident
Mm-hmm.
as well, um, and then prior to that, of course, you have Watts and you have the
Mm-hmm.
assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. all around that same time, as well as Malcolm X preceding that. Um, and I think those are the backdrops that led to this movie. Like the cauldron was already stroked because of those
Yeah.
incidents. And this just brought everything to a head. And I think that ties into the next part of what I wanted to comment on was the epigenics. You know, um, there's two different definitions, if you will. There's the more medical and more intricate version, which deals with DNA and how, trauma
Hmm.
itself seeps in literally into the mitochondria. And then when your parents and your great grandparents and et cetera, your
Yes.
ancestors
Yep.
reproduce, they're passing that
Yep.
down. So, you do have individuals who are, um, you know, privy to or more pre-exposed to, things such as high blood pressure or
Hmm.
diabetes. Even sickle cell is a compensation for malaria. So, and that's
Hmm.
mostly found in tropical areas where melanated people are. So with that being said, you're passing down these events that are so traumatic, and they're going from child to child to child, and now you're in a situation or an area in which there's just more troubling issues going on. Malcolm X said something
Yeah.
to the effect of, you live in a poor area, you go to get a poor education, you eat poor foods, you end up getting a
Yep.
poor paying job, and the cycle just repeats itself. And you see that here. I mean, literally, the gangs, they're throughout the area. I mean, like I said, the opening part is the football being taken and Doughboy saying to Ricky, "I told you you shouldn't have brought that ball." Now think about that. Kids
Hmm.
talking about they shouldn't be playing ball. Like, that's
Yeah.
what kids do. They play ball.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the older individual, he gives the ball back. But the fact that they were scared, like, you're going to get a beating for that, because like
Hmm.
that's just more trauma. Like, that's not how you resolve the issue or how you would think you would communicate to your child that something happened to them. They didn't leave the ball. They didn't give it to somebody else because they wanted to.
Yeah.
They were basically fraught with the threat of violence.
Yeah. And it's like, when you're talking about like that Malcolm X quote, it makes me think about the idea of like, and they say like, crabs in a barrel
Mm,
don't get out because they all pull each other down,
yeah.
right? Well, yeah, but then the other part is like crabs shouldn't be in a barrel in
Right.
the first place,
Mm,
right? Like they're not, that's not their natural environment.
no.
And it's like what you see is this movie is showing you a microcosm
Mm,
of a macro issue, which is the violence of America,
yeah.
the distortion of America, the trauma of being an American in general,
Yeah.
and then it getting ratcheted up a notch because then it's like, well, what's happening with a black community where there's more poverty, like you said, where there's less education, where there's less good food, where there's less police presence, or when the police presence
Mm,
is as adversarial
yes.
as the actual people that are causing the crimes in the first place. Of course, it's going to be even more disruptive, right? And it's like one of those things that you can't separate like what you're seeing happen in this movie in Compton, California from like the broader American context. We're doing this show. This movie came out in 1991.
Hmm.
We're sitting here talking in 2024. Just this week in America, the Surgeon General has declared gun violence a public health issue,
Yeah.
right? Think about that.
32 years later.
Like right, but like there was I read this and I just want to just say this because it just the numbers are staggering. In 2020, gun violence became the leading cause of death among U.S. children and adolescents. The firearm mortality rate among youths in the U.S. is 11 times higher than in France, 36 times higher than in Germany, and 121 times higher than in Japan, according to the advisory. At this point, young people in America are more likely to get killed by guns than any other way that they're going to die. And the highest percentage of that is young black men.
Hmm.
Just like it was then, but now it's like morphed into this national issue, but the seeds of it were planted back in
Oh
things like you
yeah.
said, Watts riots, everything in the past was what was stirring the pot to get to what you saw in Boys in the Hood, and now what you see in modern day America.
And the crazy thing is, when we talk about, say, Mad Max, for example, it's filmed in Australia. It's in a desert, a very barren land, and you see these people wearing all types of costumes and everything else. Well, here in the United States, specifically in the movie setting of South Central, I mean, you are talking about another dystopian area. I mean,
Hmm.
this is
Yep.
literally a case study in dystopian worlds in which crime has infiltrated at a disturbing rate. I mean, this area is
Yeah.
rife with crime, and the social practices have failed the people to such a
Hmm.
degree that they just walk around aimlessly. Like when the baby's walking across the street and the lady's like,
Right.
"Hey, can I get a
Right. She's
fix?"
on drugs. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Right. Right.
it's just like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and just those scenes from going from a barbecue where the females are disrespected because Ice Cube,
Hmm.
even though he says it in jest,
Yeah.
let the eat, you know, it's just crazy how all of a sudden, even there, where you're supposed to be having a good time or whatever have you, it's still right with the jokes. And then even Trey, when he's talking to Brandy, or rather avoiding her because he thinks he's macking, and he thinks he's like getting
Hmm.
over, she ends up saying like, enough is enough. We need to come together and hear each other out, versus this whole adversarial back and forth highlighted by some type of either microaggression or just outright blatant disrespect, as highlighted when Kane's girlfriend, when they're at the strip, and she says, "Can't we have just one night of?"
One night. Yeah.
And he's like, Ice Cube says something to the effect of a derogatory term, and then everybody breaks out and is like, "Yo, do we have a problem?" And then all of a sudden, Kane pulls out a Mac 11 and just starts busting shots for no reason.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, like that everyone has become socialized to accept
Hmm.
that level of
Yeah.
violence, right? I don't know who said it, but I remember hearing someone say like in America, once America got accustomed to hearing about school shootings,
Mm.
the whole thing was
Oh
finished.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? And I'm paraphrasing the statement. I
Hmm.
don't remember exactly who said it, but it's like that's another thing because like now whatever that trauma is, everyone is feeling that.
Yeah. Well,
You know, every like people when you whether you could say like, okay, I live in a bad neighborhood, quote unquote bad neighborhood, so I need to be worried about my kids when they walk into the store. Okay, but now it's like you gotta be worried if you take your kids to school,
hmm
and you gotta be worried if you go to the mall, and you gotta be worried if you go to a sports event, and you gotta be worried if you go to a festival or park or anything, because the idea of like violence popping off at any moment is so present that we're all traumatized by it.
well, that's an excellent point. Us carrying that fear leads to the next point of accountability and peer pressure. You just mentioned it. We're always walking around very tense, anxious. Think about this. I definitely got to raise these 2 points. One, think about the food we eat. If you happen to eat animals, the manner in which they're slaughtered, that releases a chemical,
Oh, shit.
a cortisol in their body. So you're inheriting, you're eating, you're consuming, making it a part of you, that stress. All of those chemicals in their body are now transferred over to you. So that's one, be mindful of what you eat. Two, Tupac said something to the effect of, you know, you act like we don't want to be safe and secure in our homes. The same people
Mhm.
that you want to have locked
Yeah,
up, they live next door to us. This movie
yeah, yeah.
capsulizes that to such a degree. They had beef with these guys for the longest, Kane and his little crew. And Kane
Mhm.
is just like the epitome of that Nas song, Second Childhood, where in the second
Yep.
verse he's talking about the dude who he wants to be like, the other guys who are younger, hanging on the block,
Mm.
breaking up his mom's furniture, borrowing money from his mom, but not really borrowing because he's not paying it back. Well, in this movie, you do see Kane, associating with these younger kids. They're all in high school,
Mhm.
regardless of Morris Chestnut and the rest of them being grown men at that time and not really being
Yeah.
teenagers. They're supposed to be
Mhm.
depictions of teenagers and going through the motions of puberty and developing and growing into who they want to be, trying to assert themselves. Where you have this grown man who should be a positive influence, and yet he's the catalyst for all the problems. You're talking
Yeah.
about literally young boys who grew up together, going through the trials and tribulations, caught in the penal system for shoplifting. So you see Doughboy getting taken away in the police station. That's not a regular occurrence where I'm from, where I live, where the people I grew up with. We didn't see
Yeah.
that every day. But in those environments throughout the world, forget the United States, throughout the world, you see these individuals at a young age being part of now the criminal system, which now has also become now a private entity where you could trade on the stock exchange. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
And it's also become entertainment.
Oh yeah.
Like there's like if you watch A&E's got like 4 shows about people in
Oh
jail,
yeah.
like what prison life look like.
Trying to
So
get
that's the
dates and
thing.
everything.
So that's the thing. Like it's become entertainment. Like it's like the dysfunction has become entertainment. It's become something you watch, you listen to, you see on your phone, and the humanity is being stripped
Oh yeah.
out from people as a result of that. Because when you're in a situation where someone is shooting, killing people they don't know, or randomly shooting people they hardly know, or taking people's fathers or mothers away, that's like inhumane.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the worst kind of treatment and behavior that one human being can exert on another. That's mushroomed into everything now. Now everything is like that. And like you said, like in this movie, there's so much chaos. And like you said in the beginning, then you have like the stabilizing force of like Fury Styles, right? Who's different in the sense that he's trying to provide some level of structure
Mm-hmm.
and safety, not only to Trey, but tangentially also to Trey's
Yeah.
friends, right? And there's like 3 things that I thought, like we're gonna talk about Fury Styles a bunch in this, but I just gotta say that like from the parenting and from the father perspective, there were 3 things that I felt like he does a really good job of in this movie, and the movie allows him to do. The first is that he sets like the ideas of safety and structure for Trey. Like Trey comes, he tells him, "Look, this is what you gotta do. You gotta take care of the
Mm-hmm.
grass. You gotta rake the leaves, wash the dishes, all stuff. All of that is structure,
Yep.
right? If you have children or if you work with children, you know that children need safety and structure first and foremost, right? He provides that. When that cop comes and that cop is trying to like give Trey like dap Trey up, he sends Trey in the house because he doesn't even want Trey to associate with him.
Mm-hmm.
That's protection, right? He's doing that part. But then when he gets older, you also see like in that scene where Angela Bassett is talking to him and like, that Trey wants to go to, Morehouse and he wants to stay in the
Mm-hmm.
same or near like where his girlfriend does. He's like, yo, I think Trey is old enough to make his own decisions. Like if he wants to do that, or if he wants to stay here with me and he doesn't want to come back with you, he can do that. So he's also like evolving
Yeah.
his parenting for where Trey is in his development. And then the last thing, and it ties back to something you said in the beginning when you're talking about, your daughter's giving you cards with things that you said 10, 15 years ago. There's so many scenes where Trey is in the car with like Ricky and talking to Ricky about things that
Mm-hmm.
his dad told him.
Mm-hmm.
So Furious Styles is also giving Trey his philosophy. He's giving him something to build on that will help him to navigate the world that he's in. And it's really one of the main reasons why he's not involved in committing murder later on in the movie.
And that's such a dope point that you brought up. It's not so much what we inherit as far as like money and land and things of that ilk. Definitely you want to pass down these things to your children and so that future generations can prosper and thrive. But I think it's also the things that help to bring that to fruition. Those things are symbols of literally what you discussed, and that's providing a blueprint, providing a motto or a maxim, and adhering to that. Enforcing certain rules and regulations. Sure, I don't think anybody likes doing chores. I don't think anybody
Mhm.
likes mowing the lawn. I don't think anybody
Right.
likes doing dishes. However, I think what it brings about is a certain finality to things that at the end
Mm,
of doing
good
whatever
point.
it is that you're doing, you will reach a goal. So if you start
Mhm.
off by implementing these small little things, them saying, hey, I do want to go to Morehouse, which is on the other side of the United States, thousands of miles away from my parents, and I won't have a support system there. He's not afraid of that. He's not afraid
Yeah.
to go off on his own because his father has guided him along the way. So whether it be one-on-one talks where he's skipping rocks and his father or is talking to him about the birds and the bees, or he falls in love with the girl next door. I mean, this is Americana. It's just not the
Yeah.
same apple pie, you know, uh, red, white, and blue that most people are accustomed to. It's more like red,
Yeah.
black, and green, and maybe a side of watermelon. But that being said, too, you know, there is the sense of critical self awareness. I think Trey imparts that onto his friends. So when Doughboy says, "I ain't got no brothers no more," and Trey's quick to remind him, like, "Nah, man, you got one brother left." And, that experience at that age for me allowed me to see, like, oh, it was cool to give hugs. It was cool to your
Yeah.
boys or whatever have it. It didn't mean that I was weak or I was soft, or that I was
Hmm.
effeminate. It just meant like that was an exchange of love in the same way that I may have told them, "Hey, I'm proud of them," or whatever have you, or shook somebody's hand. It was a measure of respect. It was a demonstration of confidence, and not only who they were to accept that and appreciate that, but it also allowed individuals to see the progress that they were making as far as maturity, as far as being accountable for the decisions that they made in the midst of potential crisis.
Yeah. And then the beauty of that scene is that that's the next morning after,
Hmm.
Doughboy has killed the man who killed his
Yep.
brother, and Trey got out of the car.
Hmm.
But they also like have such a respect for each other that neither looks at the other
Oh
one
yeah.
sideways for
He
that.
tells him, "I know why
Like,
you got out the car."
yeah, Trey understands that Doughboy did that, understands why,
Hmm.
right? And whether or not he condones it, he understands it. Just
Hmm.
like Doughboy understands why Trey got out of the
Hmm.
car. And neither of them are judging the other one incorrectly for that because they both understand this is who you are.
Hmm.
I understand this is who you are, and I respect you because you've always been
That way.
this
Yep.
person consistently. And I think like that's the thing is like amongst men and amongst brothers, amongst friends, we can respect you if you're who you are. As long as you're
Hmm.
you're you're like true to yourself, we can be true to you even if I don't always like what you do or say.
Yeah.
If I know that's who you consistently and legitimately are, I can have love and respect for that.
Yeah. I think that is so dope that you bring that up, man. The fact that, like, we're not beholden to some type of typecast or something that was written in
Yeah.
stone. Like, people grow, people change. Matter of fact, the lone constant in this world is change. You can call it
Right.
entropy, atrophy, whatever you want to call it, but it's just change, because energy doesn't die. And I think the fact that this thing that I'm going to call criminology, shout out to Raekwon, um, you know, we're talking about from a psychological and a sociological frame of mind, what I would call the strain theory. Now, this theory is basically crime as a means of functioning conflict, if you will. Like, there's a goal that individuals have, and in order to do that, they have to do something totally illegitimate, um, in order to eventually progress to some type of legality. Now,
Mhm.
in this movie, we talked about revenge. Obviously, there's different forms of it, but the ultimate, which I think everybody would concur that you're not supposed to do, is kill. And literally, Doughboy kills Cain, and it's not lost or shouldn't be lost upon anyone. The biblical um,
Yeah. Killing
reflection,
his
yeah,
brother. Yeah,
killing his
yeah,
brother,
absolutely. Yeah.
um, and that he's wearing red when he does it, when he's dying, and it's in a parking lot, or what is supposed to be a barren area, a desolate area, a flat area at night. So basically, under the cover of darkness, hiding it, a la uh, hiding the dead body from God, and God saying, "Hey, where's your brother? I know what you did.
Mhm.
Don't lie," et cetera, et cetera. At the same token, you have Trey, who he becomes overcome with emotion, and he says, like we talked about, he says, "Hey, Doe, let me out." And nobody really heard him or whatever, or he says it one more time, and Ice Cube's character does hear him, and then eventually he does stop. There's no words spoken, no nothing. Monster doesn't look
Mhm.
at him crazy. You know what I mean? There's no, whatever, whatever. And they just continue to proceed on. And like you said, there's no judgment.
Yeah. And like, we grew up in a neighborhood and an environment where, people were doing different things, right? But there was also a sense of respect for people being true to whatever their thing was that they were doing. Like, you're not a part of this world, you're not a part of this life, and you don't pretend to be. So we're not going to hold you to the same standard of it.
Yo.
And I think, and that's an important part. Like, Trey is not a gangster. He doesn't pretend to be a gangster. He shows up to the barbecue looking like Arsenio Hall. Like he's like he's not about that life, right?
Yeah.
And Doughboy and all his friends, they're about that life, so they know he doesn't belong here, right? Just like Ricky didn't belong as a victim of the situation, but that's how randomized and corrupt it is. That it's the Rickies that are people that are getting killed in this movie.
It's funny too that oh man, you touched on so many things that are dope. The first thing is him being dressed like Arsenio Hall. You know,
Because
that
that's what
was
that
the
was. That's what
style
Arsenio
though. You
Hall
know what I
outfit.
mean?
It
Like,
was, yeah.
and even the corrupt cop says to him, "Oh, you one of them Crenshaw mafia individuals,"
Yeah.
because that was their look. And then at the same
Hmm.
token, amongst his crew, they all knew like, nah, you're not with this. You don't want no parts of
Right.
this. The second part that you mentioned, which was real ill, was the fact that the Rickies of the world, like everybody has a story. Oh, the older gods looked at us and they kept us away from that. The older drug dealers, they
Hmm.
kept us away from
Hmm.
that. The other, whatever, they kept us away from that. Well, there was none of that going on right then, because you're talking about the crack epidemic during that period.
Yeah.
You're talking about 91, where literally
Yeah.
you coming out of 88, 89, 90, like that's the crescendo of the crack era, where you have, especially in South Central, which I think was very
Mhm.
key. It's another character.
Yeah.
You have Ram Squad coming in there, and you have Rampart going in there, and they're doing all these things, bringing in military vehicles to the public streets, threatening and basically just running amok throughout these homes, these suburban areas that used to be. The ironic part is, it used to be predominantly white areas until white flight, due to, again, riots, which led to the mass
Yeah.
exodus, due to racism, which led to the mass exodus, due to gerrymandering, which led to the mass exodus, due to redlining, which again led to a mass exodus. So now you have these black people there who, yeah, they could have a high school education and work for Boeing or work for any of the numerous
Hmm.
amount of car manufacturers there. But once those blue collar jobs dried up, it was a wrap. And the
Yeah.
dope part about it is that Furious Styles talks about all that in a very concise, direct, and down the earth way that even gang members to my man from Fred Stanford and Son, Whitman Mayo,
Yeah.
understands. He's like, you people. And the fact that
Yeah.
everybody's able to understand and galvanize behind this message, culminating in, yeah, I wish my brother would have heard some of what he was saying.
Yeah. You cutting into my cake. You cutting into my cake now,
That's my
man. That's
cake,
what
yo.
my that's what my cake says. All right. Let's get into that, man. Let's jump into the cake, man. Because I know you got some
Yeah.
things. I got some things.
Uh,
Let's jump into it.
the dope part that I love about this movie is the casting. As we talked about in the
Definitely.
pre-production,
Amazing.
yo, CJ said it best, so I'm gonna let him say it, about the voice, the actress, the myth, the legend, Miss Regina King. Where tell
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, like, I loved how this is the first movie where you see Regina King as the grown up,
yeah,
as like a grown up woman. Because like before then, she was on 227.
mhm.
She was always the little girl on 227. And then you see her here in this role, and it's so much different than how you saw her on that show that it's like, oh, you're like, oh wow, she's an actress, right?
Mhm.
And then now think about what she's doing now. Think about now, like directing, A Night in Miami, like just playing really the main character in Watchmen on HBO,
She
HBO
does it
series.
all.
Her career has just, yeah, I mean, like, but it starts with this movie,
Mhm.
right? In terms of her being there. And there's so many characters so many actors and actresses that I know they were in other stuff, but this is the thing I remember them
Yeah, you
being in
remember them
first.
in, for example, Morris Chestnut, Ice Cube, even Cuba Gooding Jr. Like the fact that,
This is the thing,
like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care that Cuba Gooding Jr. was in a show with Beyonce, or he wore a dress, or he was the first black man in a scuba diving outfit for the Navy with Robert De Niro, whatever have you. I don't care that Morris
Mhm.
Chestnut is every woman's fantasy because of who. I don't care about none of that. Later, all that, yo. The fact
yo,
is,
yo, more,
he's Ricky who
yo,
got his
Morris,
chest blown open, yo. That's
Morris Chestnut has got more run out of being somebody about to play football than in any movie.
best
Like
man,
in
one,
this
two, three,
in
four.
Best Man movies, he's always like about to play football, he's a football player, about to be a football player, or his career just ended. If you could put like when they're thinking like, oh man, I need a black guy to play that role. It's like,
Ding.
oh, Morris Chestnut. Let's get Morris Chestnut to do
And
it.
the fact is, he was a bank teller, man, a bank teller.
Was he?
Yeah. So, you know, oh, how he's come up big time. I know he
Yeah,
wasn't getting all them
yeah,
looks at that bank when he was over there counting money. He wasn't getting none of
yeah.
that play, man. None of that sunshine. But nonetheless, I digress. No hate. Shout out to that brother, man. Get your money. Do your thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I love besides the cast itself is who we've talked about, Laurence Fishburn. I mean, this guy has gone from Jimmy Flash or Jumpin' Jimmy, I think it was, in King of New York, all the way
Mm-hmm.
to literally you could see him in what is it, reruns of what you call it, of Blackish. So
Yes, yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
career
Right, right.
has spanned decades, and the fact
Yeah.
that this guy, there's no role that he can't play, whether it be a narrator for what I think he's either AMC or the History Channel that he's a narrator on,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
all the way to like comedic roles to I mean, what's the name of the joint? Clipped. He's even in the Netflix
Yeah,
joint right now. I mean, there's no
yeah.
escaping him, and
Doc, what's his name?
um,
Doc,
yeah.
the coach, Doc. I want to say Richards, but
Nah,
that's not what it is.
nah. Oh man,
It'll
it'll
come
come
to
to
us.
us.
It'll come to.
But the fact that he's able to span so many different roles and encompass everything about those characters, dope, dope. And then
Yeah. Well, how about he's got two of the most famous characters in
his
his like
repertoire,
portfolio.
Murphy's.
Yeah. For Furious Styles and Morpheus. Like when you think of Lawrence Fishburne, that's the two people you think about.
No question,
You know, like I know for me, I'm like, yo, Furious Styles, one of the greatest movie names of all time,
no question.
and Morpheus, one of the greatest characters in movies of all time.
The fact that he's able to, because he wasn't even like that guy early on. Like I said, when he
Mm-hmm.
was in Kings of New York, he was a side character. He wasn't the main character, and he just leaped off the page. No pun intended. So the fact that he's able to maneuver and become and epitomize these characters is so dope for me, man. So dope. Um, and
Yep.
and then of course, like there's so many memorable scenes, and we're talking about Doc Rivers. There's so many memorable
That's it, Doc
scenes
Rivers. Yep.
in this movie, but again, the one that really does it for me is the fact that he goes to this area and he starts talking about what happens, what the process of gentrification is, and how he's able to
Yep.
simplify it. I mean, because the true greatness of an individual is taking a complex topic and simplifying it in such a way that the masses are able to comprehend, like you're just matter of factly speaking. So that man, that's my cake, yo. What you got?
Yeah, that the gentrification scene, he made gentrification something that everybody got. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I remember being a kid not even knowing what that
Yeah.
was, being like, oh, that's interesting. Like that makes a lot of sense. Like, and it was done so cleverly. It wasn't like heavy handed,
No.
but it was like you get it, you understood it. So yeah, that's a great scene. Um, I'm gonna say I got two other things to add to it. One is I love the scene when the college recruiter comes
Mm.
to the house, right, to talk to Ricky about going to college
Yeah.
in USC. Like, there's a part where Ricky, like, he says to Ricky something to the effect of, young brother, you can do anything you want to do,
Hmm.
right? And it's like
That's
the beauty of that scene is like it's like the first
yeah.
time
I just
that
that's
Ricky
hurts.
Ricky starts thinking about something other than playing football.
Hmm.
Because his whole life he's been carrying a football around. He's been thinking about playing football. Everybody been telling him how good he is.
Hmm.
But this black guy is in his living room talking to him about something other than football. What do you want to study? What do you want to be? Because yeah, you're good, but maybe you don't go to the NFL. You have an opportunity ahead of you to do so many other things, and you can do anything you want. I just love that scene, and I always feel like that's like John Singleton trying to just give that message to all the young brothers that are watching the movie. So
Sports is
I
not
love
the
that
only
part.
outlet. Yeah, definitely.
It's not right. It's not right because you can do anything you want to do, right? And then the other part, and it's not that it's a favorite scene by any stretch of imagination, but Ricky's death scene is one of the deaths that just stays with
Of
you
course.
in like movie watching history, right? And it comes so out of like obviously I was a child when I was watching, so I didn't see it coming, and I remember the shock. I remember how quiet it was in the theater when it happened, because in my mind, Ricky is gonna go to USC, become a running back, play for the Oakland Raiders, and then he's gonna, get his family out the hood and everything's gonna be all good. And that's not what happened, right?
Mm-mm.
And in fact, it's absolute tragedy. So the way that that was delivered and the way that they make you care about the character and his family and his child and his girl and all that, it's just executed so well. And in this genre of movies, the only thing that's like not it's not close, but it kind of reminds me of it is, remember when Tupac killed Raheem
Mm.
in Juice? Like after they, like, you didn't see that coming. You
No.
didn't know, like, you could tell Tupac's character, you could tell Bishop was wild, but you didn't know that Bishop was gonna
Mm-mm.
kill
Not even close.
Raheem. Like, that was
That's your
like,
man's.
what?
Yeah.
That's your man. Like, what are you doing? Like, it was that crazy. So that the execution of that scene and everything led to it. Cake.
I'll take it, man.
Cake, cake, cake,
You know
cake.
what? The crazy thing is, like, I didn't see that death happening either. But when you talked about it in the pre-production meeting, it's plausible now. And I don't know, like you said, if it's due to
Yeah.
being jaded and older and more quote unquote experienced, or the fact that, like, you can see certain stories develop and it's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable that it leads to this particular conclusion if you're going to talk about these types of injustices. Um,
Yeah.
the fact that, we've seen this story so many times over and over and over, you do become desensitized to it, except where the characters are so much a part of your not only movie experience but maybe even your life. I know it sounds a little audacious, but I mean, like, who doesn't remember Ricky, or
Yeah.
or hearing the
It's
screams Ricky and then
yeah.
running in slow motion and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like this becomes a part of the cinematic experience where you're thinking something has to happen on that magnitude, on that scale, to grab my attention.
Yeah. And you're watching the scene always thinking, why doesn't he zigzag?
Yeah. Right. Or you think that he's gonna make it. You keep hoping that
Right.
he's gonna make it.
You always watch it thinking, why does he zigzag? And the thing is, like, it's done so well that you remember, what's the joint called? Oh, it was just in my head. Not straight out of Straight Up
Yeah,
Menace. No,
yeah.
A Menace in Society.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Kane wasn't gonna make it. Like, I knew,
You think so?
like I knew that. I knew there was no chance he was gonna
Wow.
make it out of there, man. Because I saw Ricky. I knew if
Mm.
Ricky wasn't making it out, ain't none of these dudes gonna
Nah,
make
I
it out.
thought this was
Because
like this has to be the
Ricky
difference.
Ricky was supposed to get out. He
Nah.
was supposed to have that life, and it was taken from him. And I just thought it was executed so well. So,
That's
shout
tough.
outs to John Singleton for how he delivered that one,
But
man.
not just this movie
Um,
itself. I just want to make sure we're clear. This movie also had a dope soundtrack for that time, man. If you didn't
mhm.
like Tevin Campbell on the joint, I mean, in that scene where Ricky's running through the tires and stuff, like I was like, yo, I
Yeah,
gotta get that joint. As a kid, I was like, yo, I might have to go
yeah,
cop that tape. The fact that you got just me and you on the joint, Tony, that still
mhm.
gives play. Um,
Yeah. That's a gem.
Yo,
That is a
the
gem.
fact that they got Compton's Most Wanted, I mean, these are California acts that I don't predominantly listen to, but it was a an
Hmm.
ode to them. I mean, Yo-Yo's on the joint. You had definitely out here though, Main Source, A Friendly Game of Baseball off Breaking
Hmm.
Adams, classic album, Nas's introduction on that album. I mean, even Moni Love makes an appearance on there. I mean, High Five is on the joint. Quincy Jones is on the joint. Like, this
Yeah,
movie had a very complimentary soundtrack, man.
yeah, and it's from that time where the soundtrack was good
Oh
too.
yeah, oh yeah.
Like, it's from that time where the movie was good, and then the soundtrack was good also. So it has that. That's a part of it as well,
And
man.
that leads
So,
to a great segue. What you got, my man, with the popcorn, yo?
but wait, I got the hate. I got hate, man.
Ah, here you
I know you don't have
here
anything. I know you
you
don't have anything.
go.
I know you don't have
Hate,
anything.
hate,
I got a couple of
hate.
things. Yeah, I got a couple of things. I got a couple of things. I'm gonna make it fast though.
Nah, it's all good.
Quick, just three quick things. So one, I never liked, and I don't like it now. I didn't like it when I was a kid either. I never liked Trey lying to Furious about the first time he had sex and then telling him that he didn't use protection either. I just thought that was so dumb. Like, lying is dumb, but then lying and then lying in a way that your dad didn't want you to, that would make your dad angry, is double dumb. Now, like I just didn't like that. That's my first thing.
Double dumb.
The second thing, and it's kind of related to this, right? I never liked the scene that leads up to Trey having, sex for the first time. Like the cop pulling him over, putting the gun to his head. Okay, fine, I'm good with that. Him going to his girlfriend's house in the middle of the night, where her parents, we don't know, but okay, fine. He goes in, has a manic breakdown, punching air, all this kind of stuff. It's like Cuba Gooding Jr. was trying to win an Academy Award. That's what it feels like when I'm watching the scene. And then by the way, Nia Long, who we didn't even mention,
Not even.
but Nia Long is in this movie. And she's like, all right, let's do it. Like, no, that's not how that. No, that's not how that go. No, that's not how that go. I just don't like those two things. And then and we also didn't hit on it too much, was Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett is in this movie.
Oh, and last but not least, Tasha Smith, who is like the all-time villain for Black female actresses.
Right. For all the movies that she's in. But Angela Bassett is there, and it's like Angela Bassett is like Felicia Rashad to me. If she's in something, give me more. Mm-hmm. Like I've never been like, okay, I saw too much.
Oh no, never.
Let me see some more of that. So that was my three things. Not a lot, not significant, but I everything around like Trey's sex life just bothers me in this movie. And by the way, as a quick sidebar, man, I was watching. I was just thinking about like how every young movie of that time always had like this storyline of the boy trying to get the girl to have sex with him for the first time. Like it's in this movie, it's in The Wood, it's in The Inkwell. All of these movies had that in it. Yeah. And it's like, now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's so nasty. Don't do that. don't fall for it, girl. Like now, you get to be old. You're a father. You got a daughter or daughters. You like, don't fall for that. You look at it completely differently than you did when you were young and you were watching. Like, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, Trey was right. No, Trey's wrong. Don't fall for that. And the girl and all the arguments are correct. Like when Nia Long is breaking it down. We're not together. I don't know if we're gonna be together. We're not married. I'm gonna marry you one day. What does that have to do with now? That's stupid.
And who says I'm gonna marry you anyway?
Right. That's right.
Yeah, these are horrible arguments, yo.
So that's what I got, man. I got that. All right, to the popcorn.
Oh man, what you got, man? What you rolling with?
4. I got 4 boxes. I'm giving it 4 boxes. It's it's a solid movie. It's very well done. I would even venture to say that it's, in my opinion, one of the 10 most important like Black movies from 1980 to 2020.
Wow, that's tough.
And I'm gonna give it its 4 boxes. I don't know anybody who hasn't seen Boyz n the Hood. I've never talked to anybody who has not seen it. And if this movie isn't done as well as it is, there's a lot of movies that don't get made.
Yep.
You may never get Higher Learning, which I really like. Higher Learning. You might never get.
You don't get Menace to South Central.
You might Menace to Society. You might not get Menace.
Yeah.
Right. You won't get Snowfall.
No.
Which me and you loved that show. Ooh. You won't get that if this doesn't work out. And then think about Ice Cube's career.
Mm-hmm.
If he crashes out in this, maybe you don't get Barbershop.
Not even.
Maybe look at those movies.
Friday,
look at all the things. The Friday movies. Look at all of those things that you get from this being successful. So that's what I got.
No, that's definitely key. And in that same vein, I think this is a classic. No superlatives. So it's not a Black movie. It's not a hood classic. Nah, I'm going straight classic. No superlatives whatsoever. Just straight classic. 5 boxes of popcorn. That gourmet stuff.
Got it. The high quality. Conflict free.
You know it.
There it is. Conflict free popcorn. All right, let's get into the questions, man.
Here we go.
What you got, man? I know what deep questions do you have this week about a movie? Go ahead, man.
Do men, in particular Black men, have to take more responsibility in raising their children, especially boys?
Good question. Once again, very deep question, right? Which I like. The answer, I think the answer is yes,
Hmm.
and I'm going to say this is why. Because if you're a black man and you have a son and you're in America, the history of America and America's interaction with black people and black men in particular requires a presence that is going to help to define manhood and masculinity in a way that is culturally responsible to being a black person.
Mm.
And only your father or another man can give that to you. I've said this before, so it's nothing new there. The idea of what passes for masculinity and manhood in different races of people is different.
Yep.
So, what black manhood and masculinity looks like is different than Asian manhood. It's different than Latino manhood. It's different than white manhood, and that's fine. And that's all of those can be legitimate. But the cultural and historical context that shapes the reality of what it means to be a black man in America requires then that also that black man have black men to help guide him through
I dig it, man. I like that answer. Has the depiction of black people, especially men, changed since 1991?
that.
Are you
It
seeing the
hasn't
same
changed.
roles? Are you seeing like?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you mean like that?
Mhm. Oh, we could go deeper if you want, as far as.
No, 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 no. That's no. It's just gonna turn to it's gonna turn into a Dr. Umar show in a second, man. No, I would say yes. I would say yes. It has, and it's interesting because it's like I mentioned like the idea like I have these 10 movies that I think are really
Hmm.
important for like black people and black movies, right? And one of them is Boys in the Hood,
Okay.
but the other ones on that list, I'm just gonna run them down real quick in no particular order: Black Panther, Hollywood Shuffle, Malcolm X, Love Jones, Moonlight, Juice, Color Purple, Coming to America, and Do the Right Thing.
That's a tough
When you look
list.
at those movies, right? There's like maybe I guess Black Panther is probably the most recent of those. But when you think about the whole arc of all those roles, all those things that are available to black men, that has changed for the better. And in many ways, that's the reflection of what Robert Townsend was talking about in Hollywood Shuffle.
Hmm.
Let black men be able to play everything: the hero, the villain, the comedian, the terrorist, the president. All of those things are real roles that are available, and they're available because of the success of these movies that I just mentioned. Not just the success like black people like them. They're not like black famous movies. They are, but they're also like movies that made a lot of money. They're also
Hmm.
movies that won Academy Awards. They're also movies that won Golden Globes. Like they're every way that you could measure
Critical
them, they're
acclaim.
legitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why those roles have definitely expanded since then.
No, that's tough, man. I can't even argue that. I was even going to say like, well, minus Moonlight, but you know what? I think your list is evenly crafted to where there's the depiction of all different
Oh,
types of individuals playing certain roles.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah. So you know what? Yeah, no, that's a solid list, man.
thank you.
It's very solid. Has this movie held up well over time?
It really has, fortunately and unfortunately.
Mm.
Unfortunately, no part of it is out of touch.
Mm.
Maybe the slang, but the storyline, the tragedy, the circumstances, the problems, the issues, unfortunately, that's as real today as it was in 1991.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's what makes it such a great movie.
Yeah.
And and like I would love for us to be able to have this conversation and say, "Yo, remember when gun violence was a problem?"
Mm.
But it's still a problem.
Yeah.
Like it's still an issue. You know what I mean? So like that's still idea of like black on black crime, even if it's not called black on black crime anymore, that's still an issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So unfortunately that movie is as relevant in 2024 as it was in 1991.
Yeah. It's a shame, man. That phrase you mentioned, black on black crime, that also has become a lightning rod too. Probably
Mm-hmm.
just as powerful as this movie on its own right, as the other themes we've talked about. Um, my last question for you is: does this film cover the psychological areas of social disorganization, social conditioning, aka anomaly defined in a uprooting or breaking down of the moral standards? Do you happen to see that throughout this, the cultural impact or the deviancy um, amongst this movie?
Yeah, I do. That's a really deep question. So good job on that one. I think one of the things that the movie shows, and like when we watched or when we reviewed Baby Boy, we talked about how like sometimes like when those first couple like black movies were made, it was real heavy handed,
Yeah.
right? So it'd be like, so Baby Boy, every other line is be a father to your child, Jody. Be a father to your child. It's like every line is that, right? I get it. Be a father to your child. This movie is more
Mm.
subtle, but the subtle parts of it highlight so much of the dysfunction.
Right.
And what I mean by that is look at Ricky and Doughboy and their family. The mom clearly favors Ricky and always has. And that destroys Doughboy's confidence as a young man. So in the end, the animosity that he has towards Ricky, which is why Ricky and Trey leave the house in the
Right.
first
Right.
place,
Right.
it's been festered and developed by the mother's favoritism based on them having two different fathers. That is so incredibly dysfunctional
Yeah.
and so wrong and so evil,
Yeah.
right? But it's like it's just embedded into the movie in a way that the differences between Ricky and Doughboy start with the fact that their mom actually loves Ricky more, and everybody knows it.
That's
So, what chance does Doughboy have when he grows up in a household with a mother who actually loves him less than his own brother?
yo,
That's
the layers upon layers that CJ just dropped. I think the audience is going to
that's
need to
crazy.
rewind that joint. CJ, I think you have to post that joint twice, maybe even three times. Yo.
That's crazy. But I mean, but think about that. And that's just subtly there, but it explains so much
Oh yeah.
about them, about the relationship between the brothers, the relationship with the mom, how everybody sees
She
them,
tells him
how
that he
everybody
did
sees her.
when he was in the house, and Doughboy's like, "What did I do? What did I do?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. So that's that. And that actually leads into one of my questions. I got two. Mine are not that deep. I'm gonna tell you right now from the beginning. So these are not sociological PhD level questions. Here it is. First question. Why did they bring Ricky back to the house after he got killed, man?
I
Why did they do
I
that?
think it's sentimental, man. I think one, they don't mess with the cops. Two,
Okay.
they were so emotionally distraught that they couldn't fathom leaving him there. Three, I think that there's a
Okay.
practicality to it, and that's yo, in every war that you can think of, you pick off one person, you hope his buddies come to rescue him, and then you get the lot of them. So who knows that they're not going to double back? Criminals always go to the scene. You know what I mean? So this
Mm,
is their neighborhood. And, Sean Price, rest in power, said it best. It's crude, mind you, but he says, a black on black crime, nah, man, I just hunt where I live. These dudes are that
mm,
dysfunctional where they look at this as hunting men for sport.
yeah.
So they will be territorial. They'll do these things. And they didn't want to leave the remains of their loved one, and I would use a much stronger
Yeah.
word, to do
Hmm.
to just rot there.
Yeah. I got you. So they could have called the ambulance though, man. They could have did
Remember,
that. Like
ambulances weren't
they,
coming for gunshot victims in
okay.
South Central.
No,
Yeah,
nah, you got answers. I appreciate that,
you're very
man.
welcome.
They did bring him and put him on that couch
Well,
though,
they ain't wear they,
and, and now on that couch with the plastic
that
on it,
Windex ain't hurt.
which maybe that makes it easier to clean. But everybody's
Blood
traumatized
gets
because they
sticky, man,
bought
on
Ricky.
plastic.
I mean, that was goodness. That was horrible.
Mm,
Like teenage me watching that was hurt watching that scene. But
terrible.
okay, fine. All right. So last question. Actually, you know what? I got well, two more questions. So
Shoot.
this question is also around Ricky's death. Yo, how did Chris get there at the same time that they got there in the car? Because Chris is in a wheelchair and they left Chris at the house. How did Chris pull up the same time
Yo,
as in the car? Is Chris that strong?
practical me is like, I don't
Break it
I
down
don't
for me.
know how he got there. The funny me is like, oh, he's got like a battery operated wheelchair. Like you got the motor
But he
got
doesn't.
the motor to
He
the
does.
joint.
He's doing this joint the whole time,
I
man.
know. That's why I ain't got nothing, yo. I can't explain it. I,
Okay.
I
All
can't
right.
explain.
All right. So then, in honor of my last question is in honor of California, in honor of Oakland,
California
in
love.
honor of in honor of the Oakland Raiders. I just have a question for you. Last season, the Oakland Raiders played the Pittsburgh Steelers,
Oh, this guy.
and I can you just the question I have is, can you tell
Wow.
me who won and what was the outcome of that game?
Wow. Well, you know what? I'm taking the fifth on that one. My reader blackness and my regular blackness just won't allow me to answer that. I'm very sorry. I just
There it is. There it
I
is.
just can't do that.
Okay. All
You
right. So no
low
answers to those
down
questions.
dirty. Oh,
All right.
this cat.
On to the themes then, my brother.
I, oh, this dude. Oh, CJ. Oh, ooh. Oh man, and we didn't even go over that in pre-production. That was a surprise.
Nah,
Nah,
hey,
that
surprises,
yep.
man.
Oh,
Surprises.
it's oh.
No
For
spoilers, man.
those
No
that don't
spoilers for the
know, I'm
questions.
a very, very, very much an advocate aficionado of the Las Vegas, formerly Oakland, formerly Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
formerly Oakland Raiders. Like, oh man, it's a family thing. This dude is a imitation Raider fan of the black and gold Pittsburgh
Imitation.
Steelers. Wow.
Hmm. Okay.
The original silver and black, the original team in all black, folks. The original
Mm-hmm.
team in all black.
Yep.
Wow.
All those things.
Wow. That's tough.
Oh, oh.
And before I get into this closing, just know that CJ has sent a bunch of us, we're very tight. He sent us a reminder of who's won the X amount of division championships since the latest reconfiguration of the divisions. Just want to say thank you for that too, CJ. Um,
Hey, y'all are welcome, man. I just see myself as an educator and a sharer of truth. So,
oh,
so,
it's,
so there we go.
speaking of
There we
education,
go.
yeah. Boys in the Hood is a timeless reflection of racial inequality, persistently resonating with themes of responsibility, the perpetual cycle of violence, and systemic issues that plague marginalized communities. The film vividly portrays the harsh reality of peer pressure and temptation, which often lead young men toward immaturity and gang involvement. The setting in South Central Los Angeles reveals the devastating effects of gentrification, redlining, and gerrymandering, highlighting how these practices contribute to a corrupt society and perpetuate poverty. The systemic racism inherent in these social economic structures exacerbates issues like teenage pregnancy and the removal of the black man and father from the community and home. Director John Singleton masterfully showcases the power of family and black culture in the ghettos, emphasizing the strength and resilience within the communities despite facing relentless adversity. The film also scrutinizes the impact of capitalism on American citizens, particularly African Americans living in impoverished neighborhoods. Singleton's narrative reflects the profound influence of temptation and peer pressure on youth, leading to juvenile delinquencies and gang affiliations. Nearly 30 years after its release, Boys in the Hood remains relevant, its authenticity capturing the ongoing struggles of systemic injustices faced by Black Americans. The characters' experiences with racial tensions, neighborhood violence, and trials of growing up echo the contemporary Black Lives Matter movement. Though its powerful
Hmm.
soundtrack, compelling performances, and Singleton's visionary direction, Boys in the Hood stands as a dramatic, enduring story for gang culture intertwined with family values. This film speaks to the hearts, conveying important messages about responsibility, manhood, friendship, hope, self esteem, and pro social behavior. It seems and remains a critical contemporary on the social, economic, and political structures that continue to affect the Black experience in America. So, shout out, rest in power to John Singleton for his long
Yep.
lasting impact on not just people here in America, but throughout the globe with his creative genius on display in Boys in the Hood. CJ, since we're still going on this journey, why don't you let cats know what we're going to continue to do next month?
Yeah, yeah. I got three important things for the listening audience. Number one, before we jump off, I got to give some props to this man, Mr. Will, who celebrated a birthday
Oh man, thank you,
recently.
sir.
This brother puts so much time and effort into this show, so much research, so many notes. We probably don't touch
Oh man.
like we probably touch 40% of everything
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
and put into the show, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I'm glad to call you friend and partner in this journey of talking about movies, but also talking about movies in the way that we do.
Appreciate that.
That's the first thing,
Appreciate
right? And then from my true hater moment, I do want to say that the score of last year's game was 23-18 and the Steelers won. And then if I want to be a super hater, I'll point out that the Steelers actually beat the Raiders the
I
year
knew it.
before that
I knew
too
it.
on Christmas,
I
which was a
knew it.
heck of a Christmas present for me. Thank you, Steelers. And this year the Steelers Raiders play again, so maybe we'll go for the three-peat this year and get them 3 times in a row.
Hate.
That's that.
Hate.
And then next week we will be back. We're doing Bad Boys 4. So that's going to be a really, really, really interesting conversation and fun. So please come back for that. Once again, the Sticky Floors podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are on YouTube. We are asking you to like it, to subscribe to it, to share it, and to comment, because all that helps us to do this better. Peace.